Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of Rexmon Productions podcast, where I talk about random things, random hobbies, my likes and dislikes. Content warning. Potential PG-13 choice of language, so viewer discretion is advised. Hello, and welcome to Rex Talk. Today's episode is basically Yu-Gi-Oh! What is and why? So, as many of you who may or may watch my content, you'll probably notice a lot of my content is very heavily synergized around the same theme that is Yu-Gi-Oh! And assorted video games. Well, I think it's best to explain in this video what it is and why it is so important to me. So, Yu-Gi-Oh! Dating back all the way to 1996 by a man in Japan by the name of Kazuki Takahashi, may he rest in peace, created the manga series, which was a seven volume story arc in the original Yu-Gi-Oh! Manga series. I actually own volumes 4, 5, 6, and 7. Tragically, I due to missed opportunity and other circumstances, was not able to get my hands on volumes 1, 2, and 3. I have read the manga several times, from start to finish, once or twice, the original manga. Of course, I've also read my favorite volumes and chapters multiple times over the years, but yeah. Yeah. So basically, Yu Gi Oh! As a manga was synergized around assorted, crazy adventures that involved, friendship, assorted board games, card games, tabletop RPGs. It wasn't even about the card game, but that's later into the video. Now I'm stuttering. Whoops. And for many reasons, because of the supernatural elements of the manga, it was PG-13. How PG-13? Well, let's just say there are fates worse than death, and the main character, every time he had a battle against the villain, let's just say he gave them a painful reminder why never again be a villain. But yeah. And of course, people would ask, well, what about the card game? Well, the manga does have some themes about the card game, but it wasn't until later into the development of the manga revolved around the card game. And it wasn't even until 1998 that Japan actually experimented with actually developing the betas and all the other stuff that later became the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! The TCG card game that we know today. And in fact, in 1998, 2 years after the original manga, by the name of Toei Animation, that was a animation company from April of 1999 to October of 1999 actually created what was the actual original Yu-Gi-Oh anime. It holds the name Yu-Gi-Oh, but after, the whole developments into the later years, it's now known amongst many fans as Season 0. Especially because in Japan, because the sequel to the manga series was titled Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist, because it was more themed and synergized around the trading card game. In Japan, the actual anime is actually called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters, because that was the name of the card game and the show. And then another factor is, uh, and I'm sorry, correction, it was 1999, though, that the first stages of the physical card game finalized in Japan. But in America, we didn't start seeing actual real products for Yu-Gi-Oh! Until, according to my research, March of 2002. That's when it came to the States. Now, as for the anime, in Japan, from what I've read, they started the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, the Duel Monsters one, the one that got Americanized. They started that in April of 2000, but it wasn't until 4Kids started partnering up with Japan for American audiences and all that stuff, for better or for worse, if you can forgive and forget and get past the cringy censorships and the cringy dialogue changes. For Kids Entertainment on September 29th of 2001 for the USA started producing Yu-Gi-Oh! The anime series all throughout America. Now, that's basically the basics of Yu-Gi-Oh! As a TCG, as an anime, and dating back to its original roots as a manga and from 96 to the early 2000s. And if you also watch my content, you'll notice that it's been a while, maybe prior to this, to the release of this recording. Well, that's because I'm having trouble with a video editor and struggling to find a proper working video editor to release new videos. But a playthrough that I do is Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsules, and you might also notice that the video games that I stream a lot also are part of what was released this year called Yu-Gi-Oh! The Early Days Collections. And the reason why it's called that is because it dates back all the way to 1998. And it also has all the handheld game consoles for Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, those titles, some of which weren't even released in America. And one of those titles is Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsules. And that's one of their spin-off games. Another spin-off game that I really like that Yu-Gi-Oh! Produced is Capsule Monsters Coliseum, and that was for PlayStation 2. Really awesome game. And another game that's kind of a spin-off, but not really a spin-off because it's based on the traditional TCG with a slight alteration called Yu-Gi-Oh! Duelist of the Roses. And of course, finally, another spin-off game that I'm a really big fan of. A lot of fans were conflicted about it, but I really like it. It was for the GameCube, and that was Yu-Gi-Oh! False Bound Kingdom. Really cool game, very underappreciated, does not get the love that it deserves amongst the mainstream fan bases. Now, keep that in mind. That is basically, in layman's term, what it is, what I play, and what I've been involved with when it comes to Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, here is the why factor, as in, why is Yu-Gi-Oh! Such a big part of my life? Or rather, well, okay, it is still to this day because, my YouTube content synergizes around it, but it's not actually as invested in my life the last 5 or 8 years as it used to be when I was a kid, but I'll get to that in a second. So naturally, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, that's when I started seeing Yu-Gi-Oh! On TV. And then, sometime eventually, I would get my hands on like the structure decks, like starter deck Joey, because Joey was my favorite character. I did get a starter deck Kaiba. And what's also really unique about why Yu-Gi-Oh! Is so near and dear to my heart, me and my stepsisters grew up watching Yu-Gi-Oh! Over the years and collected the trading card game over the years. And both me and my older stepsister, we both had copies of the starter deck Pegasus, which was actually the only real air quote villain from the anime who actually had their own starter deck. Um, so, boom, that's one of the biggest reasons, 7 or 8 years old, it's one of the many few things that helped me and my sisters, bond growing up as a kid, have common interests as a kid. So many of my friendships over the years, two of which that I still talk to, two of my friends that I still very much so talk to, date back the origins of our friendship to the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG game. Um, yeah, so. And of course, why is the card game and the anime so different? Well, fun fact, when uh, you know, when they created the manga series, they were experimenting around with the TCG as a concept, but they never really had all the rules set in stone. So that's why the joke was amongst mainstream fans. Yu-Gi-Oh just screws the rules and makes up their own rules as they go along throughout so many times in the series. Well, again, I quote, that's because they hadn't in the manga series and in the anime series had the final rulings for it. So there you go on that. And now I'm reading over my notes because I did actually try to script this, but sadly I'm not so fast at reading, and sadly I'm not so great at staying on topic. But yeah, yeah. Another reason why Yu-Gi-Oh, even still with my channel content as the video games, I really love turn-based strategy RPG games. Final Fantasy, a game that I need to get back to because I've been neglecting Final Fantasy X, for an example, for a couple of months now for many, many reasons, just because I've been busy. And of course, like many kids born in the 90s, I discovered Final Fantasy because of Final Fantasy VII on the original PlayStation. But, now I'm getting off topic. But, Monster Capsules. It's a fun turn based strategy game. And yeah, Monster Capsules is a little slow, I will admit. But what's great about Capsule Monsters, or yeah, Monster Capsules is what I play on my channel. Capsule Monsters is the PlayStation game that I've loved playing over the years. It's an improvement on a recipe they already developed, and it's so much fun. I just love turn-based strategy, tower defense, chess like uh formula-based games. It's just fun, it's relaxing, it's a more healthy, more constructive way for me just to procrastinate and kill time for an hour or two. And I love everything about the Yu-Gi-Oh spin-off games. Hell, I even love the Yu-Gi-Oh extremely difficult video games because it's classic, it's nostalgic, it's what I grew up with over the years. And sometimes the most difficult things have the greatest results, give us the greatest sense of accomplishments when we defeat them and conquer them. And even though Rechef of Destruction is kind of giving me some trouble, and I should really consider doing another Rechef of Destruction stream, even if it's only for 30 to 45 minutes and then just shift games, that is something I need to finish. It's still shocking and embarrassing that if you watch this, you need to go back and look over some of my streams where I've streamed Rechef of Destruction. It's been a couple of weeks, but it still shocked me and embarrassed me that in my first duel against, and I have no idea how to pronounce that evil alter ego name that Pegasus has in the video game, but it shocks me how much of a back and forth we kept playing, and I literally lose the game due to decking out, as in my deck ran out of cards, and because of that, I automatically lose the game. It's a game mechanic in like 9 out of 10 most TCG games. Now, uh, another game I really like playing is Duelist of the Roses, but chances are I'm never gonna play that on my channel, only because for one thing, I need to figure out if I can hook up my PlayStation the same way that I have my Switch connected because it's a PlayStation 2, and I might need to get a different adapter cord. But also another reason is because so many YouTubers over the years have truly played Duelist of the Roses so much that I'm not even sure if I'm gonna play it for my channel. And and for me, Duelist of the Roses is just something I just like to play when I just need a minute away from the world and just to detox and procrastinate for like an hour or so. So in the long run, I probably won't stream or do playthroughs of Duelist of the Roses. I probably won't. Capsule Monsters Coliseum, I could do that, and I might maybe do playthroughs of or even a stream of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Falsebound Kingdom. I just have to dig up my GameCube and see if the adapter cord that I have for streaming works or if I have to get a different one for it. Now, I've talked about what Yu-Gi-Oh! As its history is, and with the games and the spin-off, and about how it was such a big part of my life. But The real truth is though, despite my nostalgic love for it, despite my occasionally collecting for it, Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays, because of the TCG market, the TCG construction of how the game mechanics work, I graduated high school in the year of 2014. And in 2014, or the end of 2013 to the start of the 2014 era, that's when Yu-Gi-Oh! Dropped their latest extra summon archetype called XC Summon. And at first I was on board with it, but then they just keep but it really changed the rules in a really annoying way that I didn't like, but I got over it. But then I really did not vibe with the structure that XC Summons provided, and I just did not like how it changed the game. Though I kept coming back and forth with it, I was like, so when the 2014 2015 era for Yu Gi Oh! Came around, I was kind of sort of one foot in and one foot out with Yu Gi Oh! But I was also very knee deep in Magic the Gathering, a different TCG game, but maybe I'll do a episode, a podcast episode about my reasons for why and what is Magic the Gathering to me. But I'll keep that simple and just mention it, but not talk about it on this podcast because now I'm getting off topic, which is Yu-Gi-Oh. So somewhere between late 2015 and late 2016, this is what really truly killed Yu-Gi-Oh for me. And I know a lot of fans and Yu-Gi-Oh liked this. I did not. And what I hate was the pendulum summon. In layman's term, it was a new mechanic system that they dropped to Yu-Gi-Oh! And when one of my friends introduced it to me, because I heard about it, but I never really played with it, and my friend who I was hanging out with at the time, who likes Yu-Gi-Oh, he introduces it to me. I hated it with a bleeding passion. Another factor about Yu-Gi-Oh is eh, a lot of the tribal archetypes that they keep coming out with are very, very complicated. And more ever since 2017, 2018, the literal pace and speed of Yu-Gi-Oh keeps changing in a way to where it's truly not the same game and it truly is not the same flavor. Like it's nothing like the anime and it's nothing like how it used to be before 2010. Like I was playing a game with the said friend that I met back in like 2014, who I was playing with during 2016, 2017, who showed me pendulums. I bump into him at a card shop a year or two ago, and we play a game of Yu-Gi-Oh! I bring out one of my own decks. He brings out one of his that he was prepping based on the new archetype that they dropped like a week or two ago prior to when we met up. Yu-Gi-Oh! As a game is so ridiculous how nowadays it almost doesn't even matter what archetype or what strategy you're building. When I grew up playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, an average turn was only supposed to take 5 or 6 minutes, maybe. Not even that. Maybe like 2 or 3 minutes, if we're being honest. 2 or 3 minutes tops. Nowadays, a game of Yu Gi Oh! Every turn, if you unless you fail to kill your opponent on the said first turn, a game of Yu Gi Oh! Now is like 8 or 15 minutes a turn based on what kind of archetype you're playing with just per person. And I'm like, when I was playing with my friend, I'm like, seriously? What happened? And I'm like thinking in the back of my head, what happened in the good old days where you played cards that just let you draw 2 cards, play a monster to set 1 or 2 cards face down, attack, and pass the turn? Boom, that's like less than 2 minutes. And I'm like, nope, I gotta literally set down and listen to my friend say, I'm going to play this card, which says spend 30 seconds looking for my deck for another card. Then I'm going to do the same thing over and over and over again, all while simultaneously flooding my board over the course of 10 to 15 minutes per his whole turn, filling up his hand, filling up his board. And I'm like, seriously, I know I haven't played Yu-Gi-Oh in like 2 or 3 years, but when did Yu-Gi-Oh become like this? And I thought pendulum summons were ruining the flow of the game. So the reality is for me, the TCG is nothing like what it was when I was a kid growing up, or even as a kid in middle school, or even a teenager in high school. It just isn't. And in many ways, I like to look at it and just try to collect it, try to be nostalgic. But even the sad part is the friends that I still talk to, they don't even play Yu-Gi-Oh anymore, as sad as it is. Um, and yeah, there was this one game that Yu-Gi-Oh created a while back called Speed Duel, but I haven't really heard anything new or anything much about it in the last 2 years. And the sad part was it was a really, really cool concept, but the crappy situation was the same year that they released Speed Duel was like November or late December of 2019 or late January of 2020, as I remember. And well, sure enough, the same day or the same year that Yu-Gi-Oh tried to drop the this really cool concept for Yu-Gi-Oh called Yu-Gi-Oh Speed Duel, that was the same year, more or less, or the same time frame as the COVID-19 pandemic. So that I feel like was one of the reasons why a lot of mainstream Yu-Gi-Oh fans did not get into it, or at least not the TCG. There were like websites and gaming websites to play Speed Duel as an online game, especially because COVID, social distancing and all that. But in my opinion, Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duel had so much potential as a nostalgic formula for the more seasoned veteran Yu-Gi-Oh! Gamers like myself. But the crappy situation was, COVID killed what could have been something cool, possibly. And yeah. Ugh, excuse me. Actually, now that I think about it, I don't even think it was when COVID hit. Now I think about it, I think if I remember correctly, I think now I'm remembering Speed Duel wrong. I didn't even write Speed Duel down in my notes. Now I'm just ranting about Speed Duel. Now that I remember, actually, Speed Duel, I think the first set actually dropped in 2018. Now that I think about it, maybe 2019. I just remember buying Speed Duel just before COVID dropped because this was when I was working at the Tulsa location Walmart, but just before moving to the Awassa location. So now that I think about it, I think Speed Duel actually dropped in 2018. This is why I was supposed to stick to the script, but I went off script. So now I've just been ranting about Speed Duel for like 3 or 4 minutes and talking like an idiot because boy, did I just get all my facts wrong about Speed Duel. Probably even got the timestamp wrong about when that archetype of Yu-Gi-Oh! Or the pendulums dropped, but hey. That's what happens when you go off script and don't stick to your notes. Um, but yeah, that is more or less what is Yu-Gi-Oh, why Yu-Gi-Oh, and what is Yu-Gi-Oh nowadays to me. So the reality is I love to stream Yu-Gi-Oh and I'll still do it. There's not a whole lot of Yu-Gi-Oh games though for my early days collection that I have intentions of streaming anytime soon. There's like I'm still gonna finish Reshuffle of Destruction. I am gonna showcase maybe something else from the American version game called Dark Duel Stories uh for one time stream thing, but stay tuned for that in the future. And I'm still debating on the Dungeon Dice Monsters game. Uh Dungeon Dice Monsters is another spin-off for Yu-Gi-Oh! And I actually still have the Dungeon Dice Monsters toy set that I got from a garage sale in middle school. Um But yeah, Dungeon Dice Monsters, that was a really cool spin-off that Yu-Gi-Oh created through first they started off in the anime and then they tried to create it as a as a Yu-Gi-Oh spin-off physical game. But because of the mechanics and how long that Dungeon Dice Monsters does take, that's just argumentatively the reason why the game failed. But God, are they really cool collection pieces. Like, if you're a Dungeons and Dragons fan and you like having cool figurines, the Dungeon Dice Monster figurines that they made for the game are worth collecting and worth having. But yeah, and what's funnier is Dungeon Dice Monsters, that was also in the manga, and it is so much different in the manga than it was in the anime. A lot darker too, but everything's more PG-13 in the manga than it is in the show. Yeah, 4Kids really did everything humanly possible to make Yu-Gi-Oh more comic relief and more, ow, my foot popped, and more kid friendly for America, but yeah. And don't get me wrong, like, sure, not everything needs to be dark and gritty, but at the same time, that was just what the concept for Yu-Gi-Oh was when created in Japan. It was more of a PG-12, PG-13 synergized situation with real world situations, you know? And yeah, so that's pretty much Yu-Gi-Oh! I really wish I had more notes about this so I didn't sound so dang goofy, but yeah. Yeah. So once I get another find another video animator, I'll get back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Monster Capsules and hopefully finish that within the form of a couple of episodes. But after that, I don't know what the next video game playthrough is gonna be. Um, And then, of course, I gotta finish my live streaming of Yu-Gi-Oh! Rechef of Destruction. Uh, and then I'll showcase something cool with Yu-Gi-Oh! Dark Duel Stories maybe once or twice. And I'm still debating on Dungeon Dice Monsters. I might do play recordings of Dungeon Dice Monsters. Maybe, but I don't know how long I would do the how long of a playthrough I would do it. Not as long as Monster Capsules. I know that much, but yeah, yeah. So this is basically the end of the podcast recording. So leave your comments in the description down below what you thought. Drop in some topics maybe. If you want to hear me talk about it. I will say if you wanted to drop suggestions on what you would like to hear me rant about in future podcast recordings, I'm open to that suggestion and ideas, but I have to say, please don't leave any comments, questions, revolving real world politics because I don't want to put real world politics and mix that into my channel. Um but also, please comment down below if you were a Yu-Gi-Oh fan, what is your favorite original signature monster from the original Yu-Gi-Oh? And what is your or what was your favorite Yu-Gi-Oh archetype? Naturally, my favorite not synergy, my favorite signature monster was the Red Eyes Black Dragon, aka Joey Wheeler, was also more or less my favorite original Yu-Gi-Oh character. Now, over the years growing up, though, my favorite Yu-Gi-Oh archetype was obviously Dragon Synergy, especially for the Red Eyes Black Dragon archetype. But because of how much superhero stuff I loved growing up, and say what you will about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. Yes, I understand why people didn't like Yu-Gi-Oh! GX in the beginning, but my favorite archetype is probably Elemental Heroes, because Elemental Heroes are so fun, and there's so many ways to have fun with Elemental Heroes. Well, my name is Rexmon of Rexmon Productions, and anybody who watches and listens to these podcasts, I cannot thank you enough. Stay tuned for more. Bye bye.